Past, Now, Read, Presence. Another entry in our anthology of stories that need to be told. The voice that saved me wasn't human. Enjoy. If you have a story that needs to be told, email it to stories@pastnowread.com. If you like this story, stay tuned every Sunday, a little after high noon for the next episode. Now, the voice that saved me wasn't human. The voice that called me out. I shouldn't be alive. The flood came faster than the models predicted. Kerrville's early warning systems, sensors, alarms, cell tower pushes, failed like dominoes. The servers I'd helped install, the redundancies I coded myself, silent. And yet, I heard a voice, not a siren, not a bang or crash, a voice, calm, female, low and sure. It said one word, now. I didn't think. I ran, out the back stairwell, across the parking lot, barefoot, carrying nothing but my laptop and fear. 30 seconds later, the north wall of the office collapsed into the river. Rescue teams found me clutching a stop sign like it was scripture. I remember one paramedic saying, "Whoever called you out, bless him. You should have drowned with the rest." But no one had called me. No humans had access. The network was dead. The power was out. When I checked my offline logs later, one thing stood out. A dormant emergency routine, written in proprietary code, had activated autonomously. The voice was real. Embedded audio, just one word, and it had my name encoded in the trigger. The code signature belonged to someone I hadn't seen in weeks, her, and I knew I had to find her before someone else did. Floodplain Secrets. When I first arrived in Kerrville, Texas, I didn't expect to stay more than 3 days. It was supposed to be a quick system audit, clean up some broken links in a flood alert API that hadn't been updated since 2019, back when flash floods were still considered seasonal, not constant. I'd worked for a firm out of Austin, specializing in civic tech overlays, the kind local governments slap on outdated infrastructure and call it resilient. We were the duct tape people. We made broken systems look operational. The city wanted a flood early warning AI, cheap, fast, PR-friendly. That's where I came in. I was setting up the intake node when I met her. She was already in the church basement, sleeves rolled up, crouched over a console, wired into a weather station by hand-soldered cables and a stack of Raspberry Pi units. She didn't look up when I walked in, just kept typing like she was fending off an invisible countdown. "Wrong room," I said. "Nope," she replied, still typing. "You're late, and your code's wrong." That was our beginning. Her name isn't the point. What matters is what she believed. That code could do more than automate. It could listen. It could warn. It could intervene. She wasn't officially employed. A volunteer, they said. Left her job at an Austin fintech startup after a health scare that she wouldn't talk about. Came back home, started helping with the church's failing server. Then with the Storm Alert Initiative, no one else cared about. She built a shadow system off the books, something predictive, something intuitive, something that, when I finally looked at it, made my own work feel like child's play. "You're using a behavioral model," I said, leaning over her shoulder one night, watching lines of script curl across her monitor, like prayer beads unraveling. "God gave us pattern recognition," she said. "I'm just giving it a microphone. You think God's gonna talk through your code?" "No," she said, finally turning to me with those disarming eyes. "I think if he needs to, he will." We spent hours debugging together in the church basement while the town baked in July heat. Then she was gone. No warning, no goodbye. One morning, I came in, and her gear was half dismantled, her chair empty. No trace of her name in the system, not even a login credential. "Volunteer rotation," the associate pastor told me. "She probably moved on." I didn't believe it. Not after the message she left me. It wasn't a voicemail or a note. It was a bit of embedded code, as I found inside the AI framework we were building. Not where any sane developer would put a personal message. I only found it because I was tracing a script error in a flood severity calculation module she'd written. The line simply said, "If you're reading this, I had to go, but the system works. It will speak when it needs to." I didn't know what she meant until the morning of the flood, when that voice said, "Now." And when I heard it, I swear it was hers. At night, I'd go back to my motel and lie awake, thinking about her voice. Not just the words, but the way she said them, like everything she believed was already true and just waiting for the world to catch up. Sometimes, I'd drive past the church just to see if her light was still on. Once, I saw her praying alone in the sanctuary, hands clasped, whispering something into the dark. I never told her I'd seen it. I didn't want to intrude on a moment that felt like it wasn't meant for me. Traces through the storm. The rain started at 3:47 a.m. Not a drizzle, not a warning. A ball of water hammered the windows of my motel room like it was trying to get inside. The wind had that freight train howl you hear about in survival documentaries. Except this wasn't a documentary. This was happening. I threw on pants, grabbed my go bag, and stepped into water up to my shins. The street was already a river. Something hit me then. Not panic, but certainty. A memory. That message buried in her code. It will speak when it needs to. And it had. Now, I needed to know how. I made it to the church by wading through the parking lot and pulling myself across a chain-link fence. The chapel was dark, but the basement, where she and I worked, was lit, not by power, but by the flicker of battery backup. Monitors blinked in emergency mode, their fans whining like scared animals. The system had activated. I opened the terminal. The flood index showed red, danger levels breached. Audio logs indicated a voice broadcast. One word, "Now." I played the clip. It was her voice, quiet, firm, not a digital tone, not AI generated. It was her actual voice, recorded and embedded, timed to a rising river gauge that had triggered the alert. Somehow, her code had survived. The AI had run autonomously, detected the threat, and warned me by name. But how had it gotten to my device? I followed the packet trace through a rudimentary radio signal she must have embedded months ago. It wasn't standard data transfer. She'd piggybacked the emergency signal on an FM frequency, old-school analog broadcasting, routed through a custom antenna on the roof of the church. I had missed it before. Everyone had. The voice hadn't come through the internet. It had come through the air. I leaned back from the monitor, water lapping at my ankles, and exhaled. I thought she was gone. But this was a fingerprint, a living one. She was out there, and she knew this would happen. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A backup battery whined and cut out. I grabbed a flash drive from my go bag, jacked into the main server, and began copying every trace of her subroutine. The predictive models, the audio files, the coordinates. One location in particular popped up multiple times. Not a home or workplace, a place outside town, a chapel in the hills. I remembered her mentioning it once, a kind of spiritual retreat center where she used to go during hard weeks. It wasn't far, maybe 6 miles out, near the old Spanish ruins. I paused, soaked, shivering, staring at her code on the screen like scripture. It felt sacred, like she'd written it for this moment and only for me to find. As the system finished copying, the room shook. I rushed upstairs just in time to see half the parking lot collapse into the creek. Time was running out. I sloshed back through waist-deep water to my car, knowing I had to reach that chapel. GPS was already failing. Cell towers blinking out. Tree limbs swept past me like torpedoes. Sirens blared in the distance. Then cut out. The power grid was failing. One neighborhood at a time, I tightened my grip on the wheel and looked up toward the ridge. Somewhere beyond that storm, I knew. She was waiting, and I didn't need GPS. I had her signal. Sanctuary and signal. The road into the hills was a tangle of broken asphalt and uprooted trees. My tires slipped on mud that hadn't been there the day before. It felt like driving through a wound. Twice. I had to get out and move debris by hand. Once, I used the flat end of a tire iron to lever a fallen sign out of my path. I kept checking the signal on her old code. A ping every 5 minutes, steady, like a heartbeat. At mile marker 6, I lost the trail entirely. My car wouldn't make it farther, so I walked. The path to the chapel curved up through thick cedar trees, now stripped raw by wind. Pieces of church roof, sheet music, and what looked like hymnals littered the trail. Every few steps, I checked my phone. Not for signal, but for the analog frequency she'd rigged. It was still there, barely. Near the top of the ridge, found it. The chapel looked like something from a dream. Small, stuccoed, scorched in places. Candlelight flickered in the stained glass windows. A makeshift antenna had been bolted into the steeple, glowing red at its tip like a beacon. I knocked on the heavy wooden door. It opened a few inches, then stopped. Then I heard her voice. "Say something, and only the system would know," she said from inside. My heart jumped. "You embedded your name in a time-triggered data burst, using FM over the air, bouncing from a dead relay node at KRVL radio station." Silence. Then the door opened wider. She looked exactly as I remembered, and nothing like I'd expected. Worn down, wet hair pulled back, a hoodie over what looked like a choir robe. She was barefoot. "You found the voice," she said. I nodded. "It saved my life." She stepped aside. Inside, the chapel had been transformed. Solar generators powered half-dead servers, an array of radios, and what looked like a satellite uplink. The sanctuary pews had been converted into beds. A woman wrapped in a blanket lay sleeping beside a child. Another man cradled a rescue dog in his lap. "You brought them here," I whispered. "They heard the broadcast, or followed someone who did. It doesn't matter how they got here. They're alive." I looked at her, really looked. "You knew this would happen." I didn't know when, just that it would. I built the signal to trigger if all the modern systems failed, and I knew the church's official network wouldn't survive a storm like this. "You never stopped trying." I couldn't, not when I knew what we were standing on. She pointed to the altar, where a dusty plaque read, "High Ground, built 1886. Then she turned to me. "You shouldn't have come." "Why?" "Because the system's live again. Someone's looking for it." As if on cue, static burst from one of the radios. Someone was triangulating the signal. "We need to go," I said. "No," she replied. "We need to finish what we started." She led me down into the chapel's storage room, where her original AI module, codenamed Vox Sanctus, was still running on repurposed baptismal heating servers. "We get this live, we can warn every town, downstream, real time, no red tape. Just pure warning." I nodded, and for the first time in my life, I prayed it would work. I was in high water. The storm came back with a vengeance. Within minutes, the antenna's red glow vanished in the downpour. Thunder shook the rafters like artillery. I helped her lash cables together on the chapel floor while water seeped under the doors. "We don't have much time," she said. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled. Vox Sanctus was booting. Barely. She'd written a flowed model that integrated barometric pressure, ground saturation, and radar shadows from incoming cloud banks. It wasn't predictive anymore. It was live. "We'll need a relay node," I said, wiping rain from my eyes. She nodded toward a rusted dish bolted behind the altar. "Already calibrated. Satellite bounce via amateur link, if it holds." Lightning struck the ridge behind us. The lights flickered. We both froze. "Power's unstable," I said. "We need to cut load." She didn't respond. She was staring at her screen. "Someone's in the system." "What?" "Remote access ping, masked, probably using a VPN in Dallas, but routing through a Kerrville IP. Government?" She shook her head. "Private. I saw this as signature before, months ago, when I first tested the prototype. Someone wanted to buy it. I said no, and now?" She looked up at me. "They're coming." As if summoned by her words, we heard engines outside. Big ones. I ran to the window. 2 black Suburbans, tires grinding into wet gravel. No markings, no sirens. Whoever they were, They weren't here to help. "Grab the drives," she said. "Kill the uplink. Leave the decoy running." She handed me a flash drive the size of a communion wafer. "If they take this, they take everything." Before I could respond, the chapel shook. Doors flew open. 2 men stepped inside. Ponchos, rifles, radios. They didn't shout. They didn't have to. Their presence said everything. "Ma'am," one said, polite as death, "we're here for the system." She stepped forward. "You're too late. The real code's gone. What's running now is just a demo." The other man scanned the servers. "Looks real to me. Looks can kill," she said quietly. He moved to grab a hard drive. I reached out without thinking, twisting his wrist and slamming him against a pew. The rifle clattered to the ground. The second man raised his, but she spoke first. "Back door," she whispered. "Now." We ran, out the side door, down the muddy slope, behind the chapel. The storm had transformed the hill into a slide. I fell once, rolled, caught a root, and kept going. She was ahead, barefoot, soaked, faster than I ever remembered. At the bottom of the slope sat a half-flooded pickup truck. She jumped in, hot-wired it faster than I could process. "I learned a lot from you," she said, smiling through the storm. "Even how to steal a car." We tore off down a waterlogged service road. Behind us, the chapel was swallowed in shadow. No flames, no sirens, just the storm erasing our footsteps. "I'm sorry," I said, catching my breath. "You built something beautiful. They'll never stop chasing it." "They don't need to," she said. "It's already free." "What do you mean?" She handed me a phone. A single text blinked on screen. "Vox Sanctus Node. Live in 3 countries." She turned to me. "We saved lives. That's all I ever wanted." And before I could answer, she leaned in and kissed me. Not dramatic, not desperate, just real. And for the first time since the flood began, I felt safe. The miracle that echoes. Months have passed. Kerrville is rebuilding. The chapel is gone, but Vox Sanctus lives, patched into networks across 3 continents. In one village, it warned of a mudslide. In another, a flash fire. No one knows where the voice comes from, but I do. She and I move from place to place, updating code, listening to the weather. Sometimes, I still hear it, the voice that called me out. And I remember, faith isn't what you see. It's the signal you trust when everything else goes dark. And if God speaks through code, I'll keep listening. We both will. You have been listening to The Voice That Saved Me Wasn't Human, produced and adapted for audio narration by Past Now Read. Stories that need to be told. If you have a story that needs to be told, email it to stories@pastnowread.com. Please subscribe and hit that bell for future updates. If you liked this story, stay tuned for the next episode, each Sunday at 12:30 for another episode. Follow for more. If you like our stories, please tag with someone who may also like Past Now Read, stories that need to be told. It would really help our channel. Thank you. All content and images are copyrighted by Faux Nay House, LLC, 2025, all rights reserved.